In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
You might remember Memphian coach Bill Courtney from the Oscar-winning documentary Undefeated. Now, he's got an awesome movement and podcast called An Army of Normal Folks that you can check out at normalfolks.us.
I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, and welcome to The Sidebar, a weekly show on the community, arts, culture, and more. Today, we're very pleased to be talking with Jeff Kollath with the Sultana Disaster Museum. So stay with us for a conversation with Jeff, and a special thanks to our sponsor, Youth Villages. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Eric. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. When you were at Stax,
yes.
And we did a show in COVID, all of those, both the behind the headlines and the sidebars for me are a little blurry.
It was, sitting on the floor, hanging an exhibit in our temporary gallery, I believe, and it was a Zoom call.
Yes.
And those 2 years are sort of hard to remember and comprehend that they actually happened.
Well, we'll circle back to that because museums were one of those things that was just sort of on the front line of, oh my gosh, how do we do this and how do we get through it?
Exactly.
But you are in a new position, and technically it's with the Sultana Historic Preservation Society, Inc., which is planning this museum about the Sultana disaster. Talk to me about the society, the plans for the museum. Kind of give me the quick snapshot, and then we'll dig into it.
Sure. So the Sultana was a steamboat on the Mississippi River that exploded just north of Memphis, April 27th, 1865. It was a boat that carried about 2,100 people on it. The majority of them recently released Union Civil War POWs. So they had been in prison camps in Andersonville, Georgia, and Cahaba, Alabama. And after they were released, there was a prisoner exchange, made their way to Jackson, Mississippi. They had to march, after being in prisoner war camps, they had to march from Jackson to Vicksburg because the rail lines had been torn up during the war. They get to Vicksburg, they get fed decent food for the first time, they get to wash, they get fresh water, they get to put on new clothes, and they get to think about coming home. And especially the guys that were in Andersonville just suffered through just horrible living conditions. The percentage of prisoners there that passed away was incredibly high. And so they board this boat, the Sultana, which started its journey up north in Cairo, Illinois, really the day after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, so April 15th, 1865, and traveled down the river, unloaded in New Orleans, loaded some passengers in New Orleans, made their way up to Vicksburg, where it loaded all these recently released POWs and these Union soldiers that were going home to their families and friends. And then tragedy strikes here just north of Memphis. And so it's the worst maritime disaster in American history. And it's a story that just is so infrequently told. And the people of Marion, Arkansas, where the boat exploded and then eventually sank, was on the Arkansas side of the river. The river was probably at about the same stage of flooding it is right now.
Right.
It was about 4 or so miles wide. So it drifted down river and then off to the Arkansas side, and then where it eventually sank. And obviously the river is a living thing. It meanders and changes, and the current, the channels and whatnot. So it's been fully covered up by river silt and dirt and whatnot since about 1900, and they've been planting soybeans on it for more than a century. So it's about 20 feet underground right now, but it's just on the other side of the levee from where Mound City is, essentially. If you come in the back way to Marion.
Yeah. And are there plans some artifacts have been found, right?
Yeah, I mean,
has anyone ever dug down in there?
So,
is that
more than 150 years of soil being turned over has churned up some pieces of iron, a few pieces of wood, and some other pieces of the boat. Jerry Potter, who's a lawyer here in town, Jerry is really the first historian to really tackle the Sultana story. Yeah. And so in the early 80s, Jerry and the author Clive Cussler, you may have heard of, and some others went out, and basically they found the boat. And so it's, like I said, it's under about 20 feet of dirt and soybean fields right now. And because of the loss of life was so extensive, and there were so many that died instantly or died on the boat. So it's considered a grave site by the state of Arkansas. So it's it will remain undisturbed. But for us, we talk about when we're opening up the new museum, I tell the board all the time, the first questions we're going to get asked are, now, where is the boat located? How far is it? Can I go there? And and what do you do there? Do you own the land? And so, we just point in that general direction and say it's about 2 miles from here, just over the levee.
When I was, a couple things that I'd forgotten about this as I was getting ready for interviewing you, I forgot how many prisoners and soldiers were on the boat and the tragedy of that.
Yes.
And the on the website, people can look for Sultana Disaster Museum. There's some video, and there's a neat video, and then some other stuff. Just the utter tragedy of people who'd been in jail in those horrific conditions for years and years and years. The boat also there were 2,000 plus people on the boat, and it was a boat that was built for 375 people. A lot of corruption.
Yes.
A lot of, so it was I guess the boilers blew up, and that could have maybe happened, but also it was also of human making, the disaster.
Absolutely. The boat, as you said, the boat was slated to hold about 375 people. There's 3 decks on the boat. Most of the soldiers were on the top deck. The middle deck, they actually sold tickets in New Orleans. So there was actually a handful of Union officers and their families who had been stationed downriver who were headed home. There were honeymooning couples on there and other families that were traveling north. And then on the lower deck, there was mules and horses and hogsheads of sugar and various other things too. So it was a full boat, but obviously the loss of life was so extensive because of the graft and the kickbacks that occurred. The captain of the boat, this guy named James Mason, was in arrears. And, he has buried into some money. His wife's family had some money that allowed him to have this boat built and to purchase this boat. He owned about a quarter of it, but then kept selling off pieces of it because he needed the money. And part of the reason why he needed the money is that he beat up the boat. There was a lot of pride taken on the river to be the fastest boat on the river. And so racing from New Orleans to St. Louis was very much a thing. So at one time, the Sultana was the fastest boat on the river.
Oh.
Well, you become the fastest boat on the river by not following the channel. And so when the river's at flood stage, they're cutting across places where there might be meanders. They're going straight across it and hitting snags, knocking holes in the hull, various other things. So by the time the boat pulls into Vicksburg, there's some recollections of some of the men that get on it that look at it, and they nobody says it was an amazing boat. The nicest thing anybody says is it was a very fine boat, and so I think that was part of the other thing, and it just hadn't been taken care of, and so I think that was the other part that put people at risk as well.
Again, everyone, we're here with Jeff Kollath from the Sultana Disaster Museum. The museum will be located where?
Right downtown in Marion, Arkansas. So we have a current museum that's been open for about a decade. If anybody knows Marion, it's across the square from the Crittenden County Courthouse, 104 Washington Street. So we're open Thursday to Saturday, 10 to 4. It's free. Usually it's Melody. Our Melody Walker works there. She's a retired teacher, and she gives guided tours. And even for the small numbers of folks that we get in there, we've had visitors from all 50 states and I think 7 foreign countries this past year. The new museum will be just west on Military Road, across from the Herbert Carter Elementary School. It's the old Marion High School Gymnasium.
Oh, okay.
Which is a very cool building. It's a WPA project. It was built in 38, opened in 39. The very first event was a basketball game between University of Arkansas and Southwestern College. And so generations...
Southwestern College that became Rhodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
So, and then the next year they played LSU. And Southwestern did. So
slightly less money in basketball back then.
Yes, absolutely. There was no NIL back then. But generations of high school students in Marion and surrounding areas, were in that gym. A bunch of our board members played basketball, have played on the basketball team.
Right.
So
will you mark that in some fashion?
Absolutely.
Well, I know it's dedicated to the museum and all that, but that's an interesting...
So we will have a dedicated space telling the story of the gym and sort of Marion High School. So we've got some really cool letter jackets and cheerleaders uniforms and pictures of the basketball team and that kind of thing. So we've had some folks donate those things to us as well. So yeah, I mean, Marion was a pretty small town. Obviously schools were segregated in Arkansas. Marion didn't integrate until I think 1970, 1971. At the time of integration, the city was only about 2,000 people. Now it's close to 15,000. Yeah. So the town has grown pretty significantly.
I should remind everyone, we're still recording up on the 10th floor of Crosstown. We just had a crowd of people run by, and so that may have gotten picked up. But
it's youthful enthusiasm.
It was youthful enthusiasm of people running past. But I want to come back and talk more about the museum and the plans and the capital campaign and so on, and more about all this. But I'll remind everyone, we're talking today with Jeff Kollath from the Sultana Disaster Museum, and which is part of the Sultana Historic Preservation Society. This is the sidebar. I haven't done the sidebar in a few weeks, Natalie, and so it's kind of hard when things are written down in front of me. I can't always follow them because of the English and the clear writing. The sidebar airs here on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11:30. It's focused on the community, arts, culture, everything in between. It's also one of many weekly podcasts we do at the Daily Memphian, including the Memphis Grizzlies podcast, our food podcast, Soundbites, hosted by Holly Whitfield. And Soundbites also airs here on WYXR every Thursday at 11. We also host the podcast version of Behind the Headlines, the TV show we produce every week with the folks at WKNO. All of our podcasts are on the Daily Memphian site, as well as iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get the WYXR shows at WYXR.org or on the WYXR app. That includes all the WYXR shows, talk shows, the music shows, archives of the shows. It's a great way to keep up with what's happening at WYXR. If you're not a supporter of WYXR, it is nonprofit, listener-supported radio. Become a member and get all kinds of benefits. You can learn about that on the site, or you can do a one-off donation. All the shows are volunteers. It's an amazing thing. That is WYXR. And if you're not a paid subscriber to the Daily Memphian, do consider becoming one. Subscriptions is what pays over half of the expenses of the Daily Memphian, the largest newsroom in the region. We are also a nonprofit, and if you are a subscriber, you can do donations as well to the Daily Memphian. Coming up soon on the sidebar in a couple weeks is Shemichael Hallman, who wrote a book, Meet Me at the Library, and it will be here as part of the Bookstack event that's coming up. We recently had a number of shows. Jen Andrews from the Shelby Farms Park Conservancy, a name that I think I just said right and that I struggle to say correctly every single time. We also had the head of the American Bridge League here, which was just super interesting and fascinating. The American Bridge League is headquartered down in just south of Memphis in Mississippi. I mentioned Behind the Headlines this week. We've got Bill Gibbons talking about a big crime study report that the state comptroller put out recently. We also have Josh Spickler from Just City coming up in a couple weeks, or maybe next week. I don't know. Time has no meaning. And Steve Mulroy, the district attorney, he is coming up, I think, in 2 weeks. So we have a whole bunch of criminal justice, public safety related shows, the court system and such that we'll be digging into over the next few weeks on Behind the Headlines. Recently, we had Jenny Robbins, who is the relatively new CEO of the Church Health Center. She was on Behind the Headlines. It was great to talk to her. We also had a show about the local restaurant scene and the ones that have opened and closed. It was really great. Holly from Soundbites and the Daily Memphian joined me for that. And CJ Davis was maybe 6 weeks, 2 months ago, but still really interesting. And that's it. I think that's all our updates. Again, here with Jeff Kollath. You're in the middle, so you've got the existing museum, you have this building, you're raising money to build out this new museum, and what is it, 21,000 square foot building?
Yeah, 9,000 square foot permanent gallery.
And then 9,000, okay, so but then offices, all that kind of stuff. So how much do you need to raise? What's the goal? Where are you? Give me the snapshot of that.
So first of all, I'm proud to say I'm a subscriber to the Daily Memphian.
Thank you so much.
And a member of WYXR.
Oh, nice.
So I check both boxes.
That's a twofer. I should start doing that with guests. I should grill them. Like I know, or look beforehand and kind of make them
Make
feel
sure you do it
uncomfortable.
passive aggressively.
Yeah, very passive aggressive.
Yeah, I think
very
it'd be
passive
really
aggressive.
good.
Thank you.
So we've done the board, our board for Sultana Historical Preservation Society has done a remarkable thing in raising north of $10 million for this project.
Whoa, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
And so we've got some money from the state of Arkansas and some other very little, but overall very little public funding, some local or regional foundations, a couple national foundations, but really the two biggest donors are FedEx.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith himself and gave his
Yeah.
Stamped our project with his seal of approval. And then Hartford Steam Boiler, which is a company out of Connecticut, which formed in 1866 after the Sultana as really one of the world's foremost leaders in boiler inspection. They still inspect over 2 million boilers a year.
Wow.
Which I didn't know there were still 2 million boilers in use. So when I hear that, I was always surprised. But the other thing they do is they also insure them. And so really what they did was boiler explosions were so frequent and so common, and the loss of life and human injury it was literally like we look at car accidents, I think, in some ways. Like, it just was part of life. You can't fix it. You can't end it. And they essentially, after the Sultana, there was, I wouldn't say a movement, but sort of it put the spotlight on the dangers of not maintaining boilers on steamboats or in industrial applications or whatever. So they started this company to inspect boilers, and then couldn't get insurance companies to insure boilers, so then they created their own insurance program for it, and that's what they've been doing since 1866. Wow. So they're also one of our largest donors, and their CEO was in town last week, and he reinforced that really out of such a tragic story, there has to be some good, and really the good is how many lives have been saved really by a company like Hartford Steam Boiler and inspecting them. So anyway, so our board has done incredible work, and I always say, and I commend them for it, with really just an idea. They've been working on this project since about 2015. A feasibility study was done way back then. Started to gain a little bit of momentum towards the end of the last decade, and then really pandemic, obviously. When you put numbers on the paper before the pandemic versus numbers on the paper after the pandemic, it just didn't match. But started about a 2+ year capital campaign, and raised enough money to start the project to redo the building. And then we're at a point now where we've raised more than enough to do the building, but we're kind of at a point where we need to gin up a little bit more, especially to top off what we need for our permanent exhibitions, and then also just operating funds too. So
it'll remain free, or you can start doing admission?
We'll charge admission. It'll probably be $15, which is I think for a brand new museum, especially of the scope and the quality we're going to have is pretty reasonable. I think we're kind of at the point where with some of our, I think there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. I think we're kind of at the point of the project where it's like, okay, well, show us now.
Sure.
Which is understandable, and I think I started last July, and I was brought on to do the interpretation and do the exhibits, manage the project too, but really spearhead that part of it, and then start programming, hire staff, all of it. Fun stuff. Yeah. But as with any construction project, we've had cost overruns and some setbacks and some schedule issues and stuff too. So when you're dealing with a 80+ year old building, you're going to find all kinds of fun things.
Right. Yeah. And tell me, so at this point, your goal for opening the new building is what?
So in an ideal world,
which we definitely live in,
we will take possession of the building later this summer, and then we'll open the building in late October 2025, which will coincide with the 200th anniversary of Crittenden County. Yeah. And then open the permanent exhibition hall on the 161st anniversary of the Sultana disaster in April 2026.
So
a year and 2 weeks.
And what kind of exhibits and such are you going to have?
So, having worked at the Stax Museum and other museums where we had remarkable artifact and archival collections to draw from, we don't have that here. Yeah. And so we have a very small collection. I mentioned Jerry Potter, who was kind of the first historian. There is the Sultana historian. His name is on our board. His name's Gene Salaker. He's a retired teacher from outside of Chicago. And our collection is basically the collection that Gene had amassed over the years. So we have some objects, a lot of photos, and so it's not going to be as artifact heavy as a lot of museums would be, but we have great storytelling. One of the things that was done about little more than 20 years after the disaster was they started a Sultana Survivors Association. And it was started by a guy named Chester Berry, who survived the disaster and started collecting stories and recollections of some of the men that were on the boat, and then published them in a book. And they started these Sultana Survivors Association chapters kind of around mostly the Midwest. The majority of the passengers were from Ohio, but also East Tennessee. East Tennessee was Union country.
Oh, yeah.
With Tennessee cavalry regiments that were mustered in over there. So a lot of those chapters were formed in the Midwest, upper Midwest, and then were affixed to Grand Army, the Republic veterans organizations, which post-Civil War veterans are the most powerful veterans organizations the country has ever seen. And so stories were collected and objects were kind of created from that. So a lot of our collection is from there too. And then the usual generic Civil War stuff. So really a lot of the focal point of the gallery is going to be a recreation of the boat. The boat was big. It was 270 feet long and 90 feet wide. We can't fit it in a high school gym. You know, it's one of those things where you walk into the gym, like, oh, we can fit the boat in there. And it's like, Jeff, you know the basketball court's 94 feet long, right? You know this. So anyway, we'll have a scale representation of it. And then, you know, we've been saying kind of all along that, you know, we're going to blow up the boat, but we're only going to blow it up once. So we'll have a sort of an immersive, interactive experience where we do that. And then talk about really the rescue and the recovery parts of it, because that's where really the story of Marion and Mound City, but then also Memphis comes into play. The boat drifted over to the Arkansas side of the river, and there were a number of people that lived along the river, including family members of our board president and our board treasurer, who rescued some of the men, pulled them out of the river, pulled them off the burning wreckage. But then in Memphis, it happened in the dead of night. People heard the explosion, saw this burning thing on the river, and charged into the river with rowboats, and there were military craft in the area, other steamboats, and pulled people out of the river. And then when they brought them back to the dock downtown, or the landing downtown, you know, the community responded in really this remarkable way in terms of medical care, providing clothing, providing food, any number of things. So Memphis's role in this story is really one of, again, it was in the South. It had been under Union control for about 3 years by the time this disaster happened. The number of hospitals had grown, I think, from 1 before the war to 10 during the war. And so the local news media covered this pretty extensively and also published lists of survivors and which hospitals they were in. So that's a long way of saying there's a ton of documentary evidence about this, which for a lot of projects, again, comparing to Stax, we have records and we can have clothes and we can have photographs, but you know, the number, we have some interviews, but not a lot of interviews. We have contemporary artifacts, but not the kind of, you know, only recently with the HBO documentary and some of the work that Soulsville's done and other organizations do we have the wide amount of first-person accounts and oral histories that this does.
You'll tap it in terms of the interest. Well, one, I was going to say, you know, it's interesting when you talk about the artifacts and or not having them. I mean, you think of the Civil Rights Museum, which has some amazing artifacts in it. Yeah. But that's not really my own experience of the National Civil Rights Museum, is the history.
Yes.
And is the storytelling. Yes. And is the horror and the hope and all of that. That's the really profound experience. Yes. And I think that's true at Stax in many ways as well, and many museums, you know. So it is interesting to think about, fewer artifacts, but
it's story and it's visitor experience. And so I am to use the technical term, I am a stuff guy. Yeah. Always have been. And so, because objects can communicate lots of things. But I think it's a little different than what I've done in my professional career, but you're 100% correct. The visitor experience and the story is what's going to drive this new facility.
You tap into, the other thing I was thinking, you tap into the civil rights interest, the Civil War interest. Yeah. And people who want to go to sites and and they're going to Shiloh and, I can go see this. I would imagine like that. Yes. It happens now and will happen more with more. Is there also a thing around steamboats? I mean, in the same way, there's a thing around trains. If people think about it. I mean, this, you know, the people who are just super interested in trains, and that they'll go anywhere to see something about a train.
So there's two, you know, one thing, we are the only museum in the world that will have the word disaster in it. There are a number of maritime museums in the world. There's 2 steamboat museums, one in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and then the big one, the Arabia in Kansas City, which is a remarkable story of a boat sinking on the Missouri River and being completely salvaged. Yeah, you know, within the last 50 years. So, to answer your question, yes, there is some interest in that. I think the Civil War aspect of it is so interesting, and I think we're coming along our story touches on that, and there's very little Civil War history that gets told in this region outside of the battlefields. I mean, but you have to go some distance from Memphis to get to a battlefield. Shiloh, Corinth, they're out there. Obviously, there's battlefields in Arkansas too, so, and down into Mississippi, and certainly in Vicksburg. So, I think that's something that we'll be able to tap into. The story is so unique in so many ways, and it's like we're just outside the circle in so many topics.
Right.
This is a Civil War topic, but it happens, 18 days after the Civil War ends. It happens 2 weeks after Lincoln's assassination.
Yeah.
All of these things sort of happen, and it's Union soldiers dying in Confederate country.
Yep.
And the museum being placed in Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, it's all of that all adds up to a challenge in some ways, but also I think it's just overall highlights the uniqueness of the story too.
Yeah. With just a couple minutes left, I mentioned at the top, people know you from Stax Museum.
Yeah.
You left last summer after 10 years.
9 years, yeah.
You mentioned the documentary. It was amazing. This was the documentary on HBO. And Stax. That came out while you were still there.
Yep.
What was that like for you to watch it?
It was interesting to work on it, I think, just because anytime somebody, there's a story that the museum had when it opened. We worked diligently to enhance that in my time, especially around being able to tell more stories and new stories within the space. We redesigned the gallery. We added a bunch of new things in the last couple of years I was there with federal grant money. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so that was a great experience. I think the documentary itself, I viewed it as in two ways. Sort of in the macro sense, it was very much I was excited for, I refer to everybody as my friends, but the Deanie Parkers, Al Bells, Bobby Manuels, various people. I'd heard those stories, and I was glad that they finally had a forum and felt that this was, everybody that participated in it knew that this was the time.
Yeah.
And this was the shot.
Yeah.
And so if you got something to say, now's the time to say it. And of course, with anything, it's still art, it's still film. There's still a director's and producer's sort of direction an angle that they wanted to take. So, but overall, I was excited for the exposure of the story to a wider audience. Me personally, it was one of those things where it's always like you watch it, and then it was like, well, they should have. Well, I gave them a photo for that. They use that photo. So
too close to it in some.
But it was really great because I think I kept watching it with my institutional hat on because I was always really interested to see what they uncovered that we didn't have.
Yeah,
especially around photos, documents, and stories too. And so there were certainly some things in there that, especially, I've known, Ms. Parker I've been around Ms. Parker since day one. She interviewed me for the job at Stax.
Oh, wow.
Which was still not knowing her then versus how I know her now. It was totally on point. Like, I was so excited. I was like, I'm talking to Deanie Parker. I love her songs. I'm going to try to, I'd say, I'd make a reference to My Imaginary Guy, hoping I'd get, it's like, oh, you know that song? Nothing. Didn't answer. Just no follow-up questions. Just ask me the questions. Let me blabber.
Yeah.
Very good. Next question.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Dean, I will interrupt just to say, because Deanie Parker is a founding board member of the Daily Memphian. I've gotten to know her through that. And we have tried. And if she listens to this, and hopefully she'll listen to this one, to get her to come on. And she won't, which is totally her prerogative not to. But I would love sometimes to sit, especially after the documentary, sit and talk with her. She's a fabulous human.
Fascinating individual, and just really, to me, her story is so representative of the great things that Stax Records do, just providing opportunities for folks in this community.
We're about out of time. I probably asked you in COVID because I try to ask everybody what their first concert was. What was your first concert?
Oh, good one. B.B. King.
Nice.
The Oscar Mayer Theater in Madison, Wisconsin, which is part of the Madison Civic Center. I guess it would have been April 1995. I think 4/12/95.
Wow.
So,
wait, how do you know that? Wait, that's weird.
As somebody
that's a weird date thing.
Toured with bands and taped shows and collected shows, and I'm good with dates.
You know who's really good with dates? Is a freak about it? Is Martin Short.
Okay.
So Martin Short. I don't know why I know this. I just saw him interviewed. It was like and he can reference the first time he met Gilda Radner. back like in the
That's
60s.
pretty amazing.
He goes, I don't know, I'm a freak about dates. And he remembers all these dates, and it's kind of like how he remembers things is to associate them with a date.
Totally can relate.
Yeah.
I mean, I can. Today we're recording this on April 16th, so it's like I can tell you where The Dead played. I can tell you where Widespread Panic played.
I barely know it's April. I mean, that's how bad I am. I don't know what day of the week it is.
It's what I think about when I wake up in the morning some days.
No, I don't.
But
I don't do
anyway,
that. Yeah. People can learn more. It's, again, just search for Sultana Disaster Museum. They can learn more about the museum and stay in touch. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
That is all the time we have this week. If you missed any of the show, you can get the full episode online at the Daily Memphian site, iTunes, WYXR. You can go to Spotify, you can go to YouTube and get the full episode. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.